Alright, so this is gonna be the first video with the new furniture up too. You're wondering why I look so high up? It's because I have couch, new furniture. Anyways, let's make sure everything's set. Okay. So this is gonna be a little bit of a longer video than normal. This video is going to be explaining the weapons of Back 4 Blood and explaining how you need to build. What guns are best for each class. So it's very important to note for Back 4 Blood, one thing that I want to mention, go to your options and you want to turn all weapons full auto on, giving you the ability to use full automatic fire on even single fire weapons. Another thing that I would recommend as well is just auto select new weapons, putting that off, just to make sure. Now, I don't find myself running out of ammo that much, but part of the reason why I never find myself running out of ammo has to do with a fact of the cleaners. So each of your cleaners that are listed here carries a different starting primary weapon. This can affect how your character is built. So as an example, Holly is going to be building around Bat because she's primarily a melee character. Charisse is going to be building around the Fire Axe. She's primarily a melee character. Tala should be building around the bow because the bow is a very hard weapon to find in-game. That's kind of her shtick. Now, some characters don't need to. Heng, for example, has a machete, but yet I don't recommend you build him into melee. Evangelo has a machete. You could build him into melee. I don't recommend it. I really think you only have 2 melee builds, and so the other 2 fill that better. Now, what about some characters' primary weapons? In the cleaner video that I did a little bit a while back, I explained how some characters want to build into a certain style of weapon. Obviously, Jim wants to build into snipers with the way his kit works. Hoffman should be building into LMGs. Walker should be building into ARs, etc. So what does your secondary weapon have to do? Well, the reason why I mention this has specifically to do with certain decks. Every character should have a deck created just for them. The biggest thing that you need to decide on a deck is whether or not you are running the cards Admin Reload, 2 is 1, and 1 is none, and Ammo Stash. These 3 cards matter a lot beforehand. So before you can even go and try out guns, you need to understand what each of the guns do. So your secondary slot is going to be taken up by one of these 7 sidearms, one of these 4 melees, or the bow, which is not listed here. This means you have a lot that you have to choose from. Remember, every character starts with one of these weapons. Every character starts with one of these. Primaries fall into your 5 assault rifles, your 2 light machine guns, your 4 submachine guns, and your 4 shotguns, as well as the 3 sniper rifles. Now, these all use different types of ammunition. The reason why I mention this ahead of time is because of the way some of these work. Jim is a great example of this. Ammo Stash means your secondary weapons have unlimited ammunition. This means you can pair whatever secondary weapon you want with your primary of choice. You only ever have to worry about one type of ammunition on your character, so you really shouldn't be running out. And with 4 different characters, if your team is diverse enough, you can do that. Most characters should be building around Ammo Stash and Admin Reload. When you stow your weapon, it reloads. This will mitigate the ammo penalty of your secondary weapons reloading slower. Now, some characters need to run multiple primaries. This is where 2 is 1. Wait, hold on. Here we go. 2 is 1 and 1 is none comes in handy, where you get a second primary in your secondary slot. You don't want to run Ammo Stash on that. You want to stay with 2 primaries. And you're still going to be running Admin Reload so that you can switch between the 2. But you need to figure out what secondary weapons you like ahead of time. So we're going to be talking about these secondary weapons, my personal opinions on these secondary weapons, and the primary weapons. And we're going to rate them each in their class. So the easiest thing to start with would probably be the melee weapons. So let's change over to Holly. I think Holly is the better of the melees, like I've said before. Alright? Alright, so first up we have the bat. Alright, now melee always consumes stamina. Now mind you, I don't have a build on, so this shows you how depleted the stamina is. If you notice the numbers on the bat, they seem pretty low. However, the thing is, the animations of the bat are particularly good. You swing side to side. Now, the machete does more damage. Similar side to side swings, although in my opinion it's a little bit slower and a little bit shorter. The hatchet has even more damage. However, the hatchet's big drawback is that overhand swing, meaning you can only hit the enemy directly in front of you. You can't hit enemies here, you can't hit enemies here, you're hitting straight in front of you. Now you do have a lot more mobility with it. The highest damage one would be the Fire Axe, which again, this right here is the big one. It's a lot of damage, but it's only hitting one enemy. For this reason, I prefer the bat, even though it is the lowest damage out of all of the options. I do prefer the bat for the simple fact that I like the sweeps that it has. If you don't want to run the bat, I would run the machete, because the machete gives you similar, it's a little bit shorter range, but it's better mobility, less stamina consumption, and better damage. I don't prefer the overhead attacks of the Fire Axe and the hatchet. Now, an interesting question would be, why then do I not build Evangelo into the machete, and why do I build Sharice into the Fire Axe? Well, mostly because Sharice doesn't really have a great primary to build into, whereas Evangelo can get a lot of value out of either a shotgun or an SMG running and gunning. Because he's relatively close range, you do not want to be running a secondary, a close range melee secondary. This is why both Heng and Evangelo, I do not run the secondaries on. If you're secondary, if you're running a bat like the Fire Axe or the bat, or let's say you have a machete or a hatchet, the thing that you have to manage when you are doing one of those weapons is that your primary needs to be a longer range option. You're also not going to be running any of the sidearms. Your primary should be either a submachine gun with low recoil, or you should be running a sniper rifle or an AR. You absolutely do not want to run shotguns. You absolutely do not want to run LMGs. You absolutely don't want to be running anything that requires you to have good, precise aim, per se. You can get by with the sniper because you can kind of use it to pick things off at range, and then as soon as anything starts to rush you, you go melee. Although most of the ARs and the SMGs are better for that. Now, specifically looking, the bow is not listed here, so I guess I'll cover the bow real quick. If I can cover that real quick. Tala has the bow. The bow is a really good weapon, but it is an absurdly high ammo consumption. You need almost a melee build for it. So, if you just hold down your fire button, you get the machine gun out arrows. Now, in an actual build, it's a lot faster than this. That 32 damage is pretty good. Now, yes, you do have loss of accuracy when you're moving, but you can learn how to circle strafe pretty good. For long range, you can hold your ADS, charge, your stamina drains, and you get a sniper rifle. The damage on this is very high. If you can hit weak points, you become one of the best weapons in the game. And in my opinion, the bow is probably the best sniper rifle. For one, it's unlimited ammo, and number two, you can use it like a machine gun, or you can use it as a sniper rifle. Because of this very reason right here, long as you make a build for it, Tala is probably the best one-on-one sniper in the game, and the bow exceeds all of the snipers. So, let's break down the primaries before we break down the secondaries. Now that we've done the bow, now that we've done this. And the reason why I explain this, why I'm doing the primaries now, has to do with the fact that the primaries can be classified very easily. So all of your weapons fall into one of these classes. We have ARs, machine guns, submachine guns, shotguns, snipers. The character that you pick depends a lot. Walker is probably the best generic type character for any situation. For when it comes to guns. So let's look. We will start with the sniper rifles first. You have three choices of sniper rifles. You have the M1A1, which is basically the M1A1 Garand, right? You have the Phoenix, and you have the Barrett. And in last place is the Barrett. The Barrett sucks. Alright? This thing is slow. The ADS time and the rate of fire is abysmal. You are never going to get this off. You are never going to get this to work reasonably for you. Hey. You might want to pop back in a little bit. So, kinda, yeah. So, this weapon with iron sights isn't bad as a hip-fire shotgun similar to this. As an actual straight-up sniper, this weapon kind of sucks donkey doo-doo. Because any missed shot is so penalizing to you. This gun is great for bosses, but this gun is terrible for literally everything else. With how fast-paced the crowds are, ADS is not your friend anyways, and the amount of time it takes to just sight in and get a shot off, you're going to be using the auto-aim a lot more. Now, a slight upgrade is the Phoenix. The Phoenix has better handling, and it but slightly lower damage. Rate of fire is better, and the reload is better. Mobility is better. However, this thing is nearly impossible to hit with in any sort of accuracy once again, unless you are remaining perfectly still and crouched. God forbid you need to run and gun. This gun doesn't do much unless you do the quick scope in, scope out auto aim trick. Like that. This gun right here is not your friend. If you can pick one of these up, which if you're playing as Jim, you're going to start with one of these. It's not bad, but you're desperately looking to upgrade off of this pretty much right away. The M1A1 is my personal pick out of the sniper rifles. The M1A1 is a semi-automatic. It's basically an M1 Garand. Rate of fire on it's good. Reload on it's good. Damage is not. You can land headshots. You're doing about the same as a body shot from one of the other snipers. But you have twice the ammo to work with, twice the rate of fire to work with, and you're just overall better having the M1A1. Recoil can be a bit tedious. I do not recommend this in full auto. However, this gun is a very good option if you are looking for a precision or a long-range weapon. The fact that it takes up sniper rifle ammo means it's probably one of the two best that take up sniper rifle ammo, along with the Deagle. That's another story. So, rating the three guns, you're going to go for the M1A1, then the Phoenix, then the Barrett. Barrett is pretty much only good for bosses. The Phoenix is good until you can find an M1A1, and the M1A1 should be your choice for snipers. What about light machine guns? There are only two options. Alright, so the M249 is a very big chungus of a gun. It is designed for a high rate of fire. It is designed for high damage per shot. It is designed to make you feel like a badass until you have to go to reload it. One issue that this gun has is the recoil on it when you are firing it can be difficult at long range to maintain your target. You have to kind of pepper it like this. Now, this gun is good, but one of the big problems is that the ADS time really messes you over. This gun wants to be an ADS. Hip firing this weapon is an absolute travesty. Not a fan, but it's not a bad option. If I were to rate it alongside the other guns right here, I'd probably take the M1A1 over this, but I'd take this over the other two. Then you have the RPK. The RPK is essentially an AK that's a machine gun. This gun is a lot slower rate of fire than the other one, and lower ammo. However, this actually does two things. One, your reload speed is faster. Two, this gives you much better recoil control at long range for maintaining targets. I don't have to pepper it as much as you do with the other option. Another advantage that this has over is it has a much better hip fire. The slower rate of fire and slower recoil more than the slower rate of fire more than makes up for it. The one downside I will say on this is you will be reloading this gun a lot unless you are running a switch type reload build. This gun is also not particularly effective at close range or at long range. This is a solid mid-range option. So while it is the better of the two light machine guns compared to that, I probably wouldn't take it over an M1A1. I think the M1A1 is better. I'd say M1A1, then the RPK, then that, then the 350, and then the Barrett. What about shotguns? We've talked about long range. Let's talk about close range. Shotguns. You have 4 shotguns in this game. 2 of the shotguns feel very similar, but they actually function a little bit differently. So, the first one that we're going to talk about is probably the worst of the bunch, is the TAC. The TAC is a 3-shot shotgun. It has a slow reload and a slow rate of fire. And it makes up for this with absurd damage. This gun is very hard to reload cancel. This gun is probably one of my least favorite guns in the entire game. It's 3 shots, it's an absurdly long reload time, and the ADS time on it sucks for no apparent reason. It's a shotgun. Granted, you don't want to be aiming down sights a lot with shotguns. Shotguns in this game do have pretty tight spreads, so you don't necessarily mind aiming down sight at long range like that. However, what makes this gun suck is the fact that it's 3 shots. The next gun on the list to me is the Super 90. Now, the Super 90 has almost identical stats to the 870, okay? It has worse handling and mobility, better range and accuracy. However, one of the biggest things that's a drawback to this weapon is the lower ammo count. This holds 6, the other one holds 8. Now, this gun has a faster rate of fire and a slower reload compared to the other gun. The range on this is absurd. This is essentially a sniper rifle in the form of a shotgun. If you are looking for a long-range shotgun build, this is the gun for you. However, the reload time is abysmal. It's much easier to reload cancel on this than on other guns. Tight spread, good range. However, the better option would be running the 870. The 870 holds 8 rounds by default, has a slower rate of fire. This makes fully automatic much more controllable. The reload only takes longer because of the fact that you're running the extra 2 shells. Reload canceling is much better. Range can be an issue without ADS. However, this gun is probably the best of the traditional pump action shotguns. Any of these 3 shotgun options that we just mentioned, you are going to need to run a build for it, specifically built around reload speed and movement speed with the shotguns in order to make them viable. The one exception is the AA-12. The AA-12 is an absolute beast of a unit. As a fully automatic shotgun with a magazine reload, it is one of the best shotguns in the game. It has good range, however, and it can be good as a hip fire. This is the best shotgun option in the game because of the overall utility it provides. However, this gun's biggest drawback is the fact that you're going to bleed ammo on this gun. This is a high rate of fire, high automatic weapon. So, rating your shotguns, I'm going to go AA-12, the 870, the Super 90, and the TAC-14. Which, the TAC-14, I would pretty much avoid at all costs. And the Super 90, I would only pick up if you specifically want a shotgun. I think the 870 is the better option. Now, the more versatile picks that are much more preferential would be the assault rifles and the submachine guns. Submachine guns are a class I don't often use a lot in this game. Now, for your submachine gun options, come into the armory for a minute, you have 5 options, and I'm going to say 5. One of them is tied into your secondary slot, this being the Tech 9. The Tech 9 is very important to understand how it works first, before you choose to pick up one of the other guns. This thing is basically a bullet hose. If you're hip firing it, it's not too bad. As long as you're, staying still. You actually do have a decent amount of range on this in ADS. I do want to mention that. However, the damage per shot is utterly pitiful. That's the one thing on the Tech 9 you have to manage. This gun is a very good gun for the secondary guns having unlimited ammo, because at that point it basically just becomes a bullet hose. Bearing this in mind, the Vector is essentially the Big Daddy version of it. This gun has an absurdly good rate of fire. This is a very fast gun, pretty accurate in ADS at close to mid-range. At any mid to long, you're going to want to pepper your shots in order to stay on target. However, this gun is the worst SMG in the game, and it's not even close. For one, you burn through ammo in full auto like it's nobody's business, or in hip fire, because it only has a 19-round magazine. The other issue that this gun has is it has a relatively long reload time for the SMGs. This is one of those weapons that you're going to be primarily using as a big boy killer, believe it or not. You want an extended magazine on this thing, you want a little bit of longer range rifling, and this is just going to be a high rate of fire option for big boys and bruisers, things of that nature that get up close to you. Anything with any sort of range, like watchers or stalkers or hawkers, this gun is at best a pep fire gun. This is Tala's primary starting weapon as well, and I recommend you switch over to something better because she has much better options than this. The MP5 and the UMP45 are relatively in the same ballpark. I would give a slight nod. I'll say that the MP5 is probably the next worst. The MP5 is not a bad gun. It has a good reload speed, it has a decent rate of fire. It's not the easiest to control at long range. The hip fire is pretty good as long as you're not moving. The range on this is fairly good. The downside to it is simply the damage, and it's pretty lackluster. The UMP45 has a lower ammo count, which can hold it back. However, the recoil on this gun is much lower compared to the MP5. The MP5 has slightly more ammo, a slightly better reload, and slightly more range. This one has slightly better damage, and slightly better... Yeah, the damage is really it. Damage and range, because of the recoil on it. These two guns are pretty much interchangeable in my opinion. They're both just mediocre SMGs. Whichever one you find first is going to be better for you. The Uzi is probably my top pick, believe it or not. The Uzi can do many things. It is not a long-range weapon by any means. If it's at long range, you're going to be peppering like this. It has the most ammo out of all the SMGs, which is the main reason why. The rate of fire is particularly good, and it's pretty easy to control in ADS. However, hip fire is pretty bad, and especially if you're moving, you're not going to get much done. However, the reason why this is the #1 option to me, even compared to the other two, it is the highest damage per shot out of the SMGs, and it has a good high rate of fire. This makes it a good bullet dump type weapon. So for your SMGs, you have your Uzi. Between these two are tied for second, and then the Vector. And I would not recommend that you combine any of the SMGs with the Tech 9. You want to kind of just use the Tech 9 as a high rate of fire option. If you don't like the Tech 9, but you want a high rate of fire option, I would recommend that you run one of these as a secondary. I just did a playthrough on Evangelo where I ran a shotgun and SMG, and pretty much the SMG served me well as my long-range weapon of choice. ARs are surprisingly what this game does best. There are 5 ARs to choose from. The Ranch Rifle, the M4 Carbine, the AK-47, the M16, and the SCAR. The bottom of the food chain has to be the M16. The M16's biggest issue is it's a 3-round burst weapon with a 20-round magazine. First off, that just pisses me off. Now, hip fire on this gun kinda sucks as a burst weapon. In ADS, it can function as a decent sniper rifle. It has a very tight spread on its burst, and this gives it the ability to confirm its shots very accurately at long range. This can essentially make it into a sniper rifle of choice for certain characters. However, the biggest drawback that this gun suffers from is its 3-round burst. It sucks at hip fire. It sucks at ammo consumption. You really get forced to ADS a lot more with this gun than you would like to. This is definitely a marksman style weapon. And the 20-round magazine means you will be reloading a lot. Next up would be the Ranch Rifle. Now the Ranch Rifle is supposed to be the balance between the sniper rifle and the assault rifle. This is a very good weapon in single fire. This essentially fires as a lower damage, higher ammo version of the M1A1. If you like the M1A1 but don't like sniper ammo and want a faster rate of fire option, this is your weapon. The full auto on this is also better. However, it becomes nearly uncontrollable near the end of the magazine. So you're pretty much just going to use this as a sniping type weapon in single fire. The reason why this gun sucks so much is it's a long reload time, and it just doesn't provide the pop. This gun is in an unfortunate situation where it's in between the M1A1 and the M16. If you want a higher damage, long-range peppering option like this, you'll run this over the M16. But if you want a higher damage option that's better up close at fully automatic, you're going to pick the M1A1. There's no real reason to pick a Ranch Rifle. The only reason why it's getting the nod over the M16 is the M16 just runs out of ammo too fast compared to this. Now, the other 3 ARs all come down to personal preference, in my opinion. I would probably put the SCAR at the bottom for a couple of reasons. The SCAR has a very good rate of fire. It is very fast. This makes hip fire a bit harder, but in iron sight or in scope, you're in very good territory. The reload on this gun sucks. Now, the damage per shot is pretty good, but the 2 things that hold this gun back, why it's not better than the other 2, has to do with both that reload and that ammo count. You burn through a lot of ammo with this thing because of its low ammo, low magazine, and its higher recoil. And you couple that with a longer reload time, it's the less effective option, in my opinion. Next up, you have the AK. Now, the AK has the exact same ammunition stat that the SCAR does. So why do I prefer this over it? See the difference on the recoil? It has a faster rate of fire in iron sight, and it has a tighter spread in iron sight than the SCAR did. Now, hipfire is much worse. This is not a gun that you're going to be hip firing very often. If you do, you're going to be peppering like this, and even that's not very good. However, what this gun excels at is being a solid mid-range bullet hose. If you want more range than an SMG, and you don't want to compete with SMG ammo, I would recommend the AK. Now, my personal favorite is the M4. It's the lowest damage out of all of the assault rifles. However, it has the fastest reload out of the assault rifles. It has the best range and accuracy out of the assault rifles, and it has a good clip. You do need to pepper this at longer ranges, but it's pretty damn good compared to the other guns at that same range. The gun's biggest drawback is the low damage. Your damage per shot is very poor compared to the AK or the SCAR. However, I still think it's the most reliable option. Easy recoil to control, good reload speed, decent rate of fire, pretty overall weapon. The AK is pretty good. The downside to this gun is just simply the ammo, in my opinion, and its lack of control of hipfire. The SCAR is good damage, but hard to control. And the other two I won't even bother with. So now, we have the handguns. The handguns are really the fun thing. Unlike most guns in this game, or most games, the guns are actually pretty good. So the first thing that let's talk about is the Beretta. There are two Berettas. The Beretta is kind of your standard pistol, right? With full auto on, this thing is actually pretty damn good. The damage per shot is around the same as most of your SMGs, with the only downside being a much lower magazine. This gun is arguably better than the Vector in my opinion. It's a slightly less ammo, slower rate of fire, higher damage per shot. This gun is a pretty good gun. Now, the burst version of this gun, on the other hand, the burst version has a slightly longer reload than the regular version, but it's higher damage per bullet. In full auto, it essentially becomes a submachine gun. Both of the Berettas are decent options, and I would recommend that you don't overlook them, just because they're not impressive or fancy. However, the gun's biggest issue, all of these issues, is range. You have to be a marksman to hit pistols reliably at range. Particularly with high rate of fire. That being said, Beretta's pretty good. The Glock is an interesting option. You have two versions of the Glock as well, which we'll start with the auto, which is essentially a machine pistol. This thing is designed to unload ammo very quickly. High rate of fire, high damage. Problem is, you never want to use this at any sort of range. Ever. You miss most of your shots. Reload's a bit longer than I'd like as well. The standard Glock is the better option. It's higher damage per shot than the regular Glock. In full auto, the ammo count is actually, and recoil is actually much more manageable. You use the recoil to your advantage more than you can with the automatic. And as a single shot type weapon as well, it's not particularly bad. Although I do prefer the Beretta over this, for the simple fact of the matter is that the Beretta has better sights, and the Beretta has much easier to control recoil and better range than this does, even though it's slightly higher damage per shot. The 1911 is sort of the in-between between the Magnums and actual pistols like the Beretta. High damage in single shot, recoil's a bit difficult to control. Long reload. Decent sniping tool, but there's never a reason to take the 1911 compared to the Deagle. That's this weapon's one big downside. Like, that's nice right there, right? but you only get one more bullet than this. Now, the Deagle has a longer reload time and a slower rate of fire than the 1911 does. However, full auto is much easier to control with this gun, and this gun is much more precise at range. The Magnum is interesting. I didn't like the Magnum when I first started playing, but it's grown on me a little bit. The Magnum has a faster rate of fire and a reload speed than you would initially anticipate. This does serve it well. It's by no means a marksman's weapon, but then again, none of the handguns are. But it can be serviceable like this. Up close, it can be a decent substitute for, you know, an automatic option, just kind of fanning the hammer like this. The one downside that this weapon has compared to the other two is it lacks that raw punch. It falls right in between the 1911 and the Deagle in terms of damage output. However, in my opinion, it's a lot harder to control than either of those two options. Now, we already covered the Tech 9, so I don't feel the need to cover that here. Let's cover the Blusion. The Blusion is single-handedly the worst weapon in the game. It's a double-barrel shotgun, and it fires both barrels when you pull the trigger. This gives it absurdly high one-shot potential up close. But in a game when you get surrounded by enemies like it's nothing, this weapon is terrible. This gun does next to no damage at any sort of range. There's no reason to ADS with this gun. This makes it a point-blank type weapon like this. If you want to run a mean build based around temporary health per pellet, and this is a pretty good gun. But even at a distance, say, like this, with iron sights, that damage right there is pitiful compared to other guns. Never pick up the Blusion. It's one of the main reasons why Mom always has to run a different one. So rating your secondaries, I would probably put the Deagle at the top. We'll go Deagle, Magnum, regular Beretta, Beretta Burst, 1911, Glock, Tech 9, Glock Auto, Blusion. That's the order I would do. So, that has been the basic gun guide as to how each of the guns control. We're not going to be talking about attachments or anything of that nature. You're going to find that kind of randomly in the environment.